Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSat Network. Friend, as you know, today we have a topic for discussion: the role of education in child development. We will try to find out the different facets of education and how it helps in the development of a child. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in the studio Mr. H.R. Sharma. He is currently principal of CRPF school, Delhi, and he has experience of about 8 years as a principal and many years as a teacher of the and he is a known educationist and have keen eye on the educational issues which are required for the development of child. So on your behalf, I welcome Dr. Sharma for a research lecture on this very topic.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
I think education begins right from the birth of a child. You know, it is said there is something called prenatal education. I would like to cite a very appropriate example of Abhimanyu. It is believed that Abhimanyu had the capacity to break the maze simply by having heard the strategy or the plan from his own father. So, it is believed that, even today it is believed that normally when a child is conceived, when the mother is in a family way, the mother is advised to attend certain cultural programs, is supposed to have very, very proper environment. She is supposed to follow that spiritual path and many other things. So this is what I think. It is not something that has to be constricted or to be limited. Since education is a training not for living but for life, it's a lifetime training. In this lifetime training, the child is trained, his ability is enriched and developed so that the child can live in society, so that the child can adjust with other members of the society. And if this ability has been substantially, brilliantly developed, then the child finds himself or herself quite successful in dealing with any kind of situation. It is rightly said, at some point of time it has been said by Swami Vivekananda that education is the manifestation of perfection which is already there in a child. Since it is already there in a child, we as educators, we as teachers have to bring that ability out to the best of our capability, to the best of our potential. It is believed, as in the words of Rabindranath Tagore, a child is like a plant that has to be nurtured with lot of care and caution. And if we become overzealous or over enthusiastic in over pruning that plant, we will definitely be playing very, very disastrous role as a teacher. So this is why I think that a teacher should observe as a gardener, silently and quietly, and as and when there is a need of cutting the plant, cutting the leaf which is grown beyond the size or which is out of size, then only we should do that intervention. Otherwise, I think we should be silent observer. We should give ample opportunities for the child to express himself, to express herself. I would like to recount here the words of Rousseau, who has rightly said that a man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. This chain may be of any sort. It may be a chain of religion, it may be the chain of caste, it may be a chain of creed. As a result, the child finds it very, very difficult to think independently. And this is the reason why in today's scenario we find that even after completion of nearly 13, 14 years of schooling, sometimes the child is devoid of the capacity, the potential, the ability to think independently. So I think there should be ample opportunities given to the child to think. I would like to say the essence of entire education is to develop in every human being politeness, humility. Vidya dadati vinayam. Vinayad yati patratam, patratvad dhanam apnoti, dhanad dharma tata sukham. Somewhere I feel along the line, we have lost the track of humility. We have come to draw this conclusion that education means the development of only cognitive faculty, only intelligence. And that's the reason why sometimes people, though, are called well educated, but when it comes to behavior, they are not up to the mark. So I think there should be sufficient space in education for making every individual, making every human being very polite, well-mannered, courteous, educated. And over and above, we should also feel the presence of other human beings, because on this planet we are not the only human beings. There are other human beings as well, and we are sharing the space with other human beings. So I think this is another very, very important aspect. Then at the same time, the educational institutions should pay requisite attention to the development of sensitivity. I think sensitivity is another very, very important aspect which matters. Quite often we find on the road, suppose somebody has met with an accident or somebody is facing some unfavorable situation, we tend to ignore that person. I think our entire education fails there. If we are not able to spare some time to our own fellow human being, if we are not concerned about the other human being, that means somewhere we are lacking in the most essential feature, quality of a human being, and that is sensitivity. So I think if we compare today's education system, or rather the today's scenario with the scenario which prevailed some 30, 40 years back, when in any part of the town or in any part of the village, in any part of the city, we found somebody facing any unfavorable situation, we used to come to the rescue of the person. We were immediately drawn to that person, that we had strong feeling of concern for others. But today, everybody is in a mad rush. We have become too much self-centered. We have become very much selfish. Now, it is, I think, very, very important area that today's education must focus proper attention. And I'm certain this has to begin right from the beginning. This has to start at the very outset of education system. And sometimes we say that this ability cannot be developed in children. I feel that is absolutely wrong. This is, at least, I do not subscribe to this opinion, because I think that wherever I have been, as a principal, as a teacher, I have been able to develop this habit, this ability in my children, and I have really found them very, very responsive We have no doubt had to point once or twice, but then finally we found the child was able to develop that ability. So, service before self. I think this is another important characteristic feature that every human being is supposed to develop. I would like to cite an example that, suppose we are attending any marriage ceremony and we are in a queue standing, we start jostling and pushing, we do not give space to others. Why do we become so concerned about our own selves? Now, does it not mean that somewhere we are missing the most essential quality of a human being? And if we do not have that most essential quality of a human being, then is not our education inadequate? Is it not insufficient? And if this habit is not developed either at a school or at home, in a school, of course, the teachers have to be the role models. Quite often it is believed that a child is very, very keen observer. Whatever the teacher says, whatever the teacher does, the child very, very minutely observes and tries to imbibe that quality. I remember having read certain instances from Mahatma Gandhi ji. It's believed that Mahatma Gandhi ji was also a teacher at some point of time, not a formal teacher, of course, in Leo Tolstoy farm in South Africa. He had the responsibility to look after some children. He has written in his autobiography that his students became his best teachers. Now, one may be a little surprised, how can students become teachers? But I think he was very much right. It is our students who play a very, very effective role, very crucial and vital role in helping us become a teacher. I am of this opinion that if we teach a bunch of very well-mannered children, educated children, intelligent children, we automatically become a wonderful teacher. On the contrary, if we are in the midst of those children who are ill-mannered, who do not have the ability to behave in a proper way, who do not have the ability to communicate, the most essential quality, which I think that particularly at an early age, I think two essential abilities which need to be developed in a child are ability to communicate effectively and the logical ability, that is maths. At primary level, if children are taught mathematics and language is going to make them very effective in communication, and maths is going to make them very, very effective in logical reasoning, logical ability, rational faculty will be adequately developed. So I think these two subjects should be given due importance. Now, when it comes to teaching of language, being an English teacher, I am of this opinion that the four skills of teaching language, that is listening, speaking, reading and writing, these are the four skills of language. Now, if these four skills are developed right from the beginning during student life with adequate emphasis, with proper care, I am certain the child will have ability to think and express himself or herself. I think expression is another very, very important area which has to be given due attention. It is believed that even nature expresses itself. Manifestation or expression is something that should be developed in every child. Sometimes even after the completion of 12 to 14 years of schooling, we find that a child is not able to communicate effectively only because the child has not been given the platform to speak. And the best platform can be given to the child in school only. So I think language and mathematics are other important areas where we have to be equally concerned. Then I would like to talk about the teaching of science. It's a matter of great pain that I would like to share that the way science is being taught, I don't feel this is the right way. We are all the time emphasizing on theory. As a result, the child is not able to understand even the fundamentals of science, even the basics of science. Quite often, laboratory is the last place for the children to visit. I felt very delighted to learn that in USA, even when they have to teach evaporation, they take a bucket of paint and give an opportunity to the child to paint a wall, and thereby very naturally the wall dries up and the child learns the process of evaporation. I think there is a dire need of developing in today's children the passion for self-learning. I think at one point of time I remember having read one very important line of the report submitted by Professor Yashpal, who very rightly said that the biggest burden of the child is not the bag, it's rather the lack of comprehension. Quite often we find that somewhere while framing our curriculum, we fail to understand one thing, and that is the relevance of the text being allocated, the text being designed. Quite often I find that the book which is written for class 4 child or class 5 child is even difficult for a class 8 or class 9 student. Now, until and unless the child is able to understand the line, the child will consider, or rather the child will find it to be the greatest burden. So here again I would like to suggest as an educator the need of bringing about a change in our curriculum, designing, the text planning. And there should be adequate role of the teachers, the school teachers. Normally we find that curriculum is designed by the people who sometimes have not had any experience of class teaching, school teaching. And if they do not have any experience of school teaching or class teaching, I think they may not be very much competent to plan, to decide whether the text which is designed for a particular class is up to the standard of that class, or is it beyond the capability of the children to grasp. Because anything which is being learned with difficulty, anything which is acting as a burden in the mind of the child, cannot be retained for a long period of time. We can take the example of certain children of class 9 or class 10, just after having taken their examination. Even after the lapse of 1 month, if we ask them a question from any subject, they draw a blank. it appears as if they have never read that particular line. What does it show? That somewhere the part that they have learnt, they learned that part purely with an intention to take examination and to forget that thereafter. So I think that again is an important domain, an important area needing serious contemplation by educationists, by those who are at the helm of affairs, those who have to design the curriculum, those who have to design the text. It's very, very essential for them to look into that particular aspect. Now, since our society has undergone a great change, there was a time when we had agrarian society, our needs and requirements were different. Then we had industrial society. Now the society that we are living in is post-industrial society, and that is knowledge society. And there has been an explosion of information. The amount of information that is there, it is really very difficult for the child to select and to find out what is relevant for the child, what is irrelevant for the child. And quite often I even am amazed to find that as the number of books are being increased, the passion for reading is decreased. This is very ironical. And we educators, we teachers, have to really give adequate and sufficient consideration to this area. We have to think how we can develop passion in the children to read. Because I think as a teacher, if we have been able to develop only one quality in the children, and that is the reading habit, we must feel that we have really imparted the best education to the children. Because if the children do not have the passion for reading, if they do not like to read, if they are not passionate about it, then they will definitely not be able to enrich different faculties. They will not be able to enrich their imaginative faculty. They will not be able to develop their cognitive ability. The affective domain may not be sufficiently developed. So I think that we have to really think about this matter very, very seriously, so that children may have passion for reading. And no doubt we have a library period. But how effectively that library period is, that is for us to decide. Now another important thing that I think, where it has been rightly said, somebody has very rightly said, that when a child enters an educational institution at the age of 3 or 4, the child is like an angel. But at the age of 17 or 18, when the child moves out of the school, the child turns out to be a little devil. Now it is for us educationists to think and introspect, why does it happen, and find out some solution which is viable and which is very, very important. Now, one of the most important areas which I would like to speak about is regarding the introduction of CCE. That is continuous and comprehensive evaluation. Now I think this is a new concept which is being developed Now, there are certain educationists who have not fully been able to embrace it with all affection and love. There is still in certain pockets of our country where the teachers as well as principals are still somewhere in a state of confusion. No doubt, whenever any new concept is introduced, whenever any change is introduced, it's difficult. And it is really registered a lot. But I personally believe, it's my personal opinion, that introduction of CCE is a real boon. Only if we can implement it properly. No doubt we have to face certain problems in its implementation, but if we have been able to implement it, it can be the real boon. CCE, that is continuous and comprehensive evaluation. Now the question arises, why should evaluation be continuous and why should it be comprehensive? I think evaluation is the most important part of our entire education system. It definitely plays very, very important role because it is through evaluation that we come to know to what extent we have been able to reach our goal. Now I think in the past also evaluation was there, and even 2-3 years back also we had evaluation, but that used to be an evaluation once in a year or twice a year. I think that was wrong, because we cannot have actual evaluation if we are making it just once in a year or twice a year. Evaluation should really be a continuous process. The reason being because maybe the child whom we are teaching may not be in proper state of mind. Maybe there may be some domestic problems may be there may be biological problems, physical problems may be there. And as the old system of evaluation was, the 3-hour examination at a stretch once in a year, that was able to test only the ability to cram. As a result, the actual potential of the child could not be assessed. So I think here one great advantage of CCE has been that it is at least evaluating a child through and through. At every stage the child is being evaluated. There are umpteen number of tests which the child has to take, and then finally we draw the conclusion that we have formative assessments, then we have summative assessment. Now another important thing here in assessment, that every time it used to be pen and paper test. There are certain children who are not very good in cramming. Since they are not very good in cramming, it's not essential that they'll be able to produce whatever they have read on paper in an effective manner. So we should have different modes of assessment. We have different ways of assessment, and CBSE has very rightly planned that the child should be tested in umpteen number of ways. There should be pen and paper test, there should not be pen and paper test. Let the child prepare a project, let the child prepare a model, let the child answer certain questions orally. Let us also try to observe the child in the classroom, because Attentiveness in the classroom is also very essential. There are certain children who come out with brilliant ideas in the classroom. They're very responsive, they answer the questions so effectively. So I think it is not one specific mode that we can consider that this is the best mode of evaluation. And then we have essay 1 and essay 2, that is summative assessment of the child. Fine, after 4 formative assessments, if you have 2 summative assessments, thereby you are able to understand whether the child deserves to be promoted to the next class. So that is continuous evaluation. And I think that children are quite happy, though there are some teachers, there are some parents also who still feel that there is something seriously wrong with our system, because they think that children don't feel comfortable, or children have been overburdened because they have to do a lot of paperwork and all. I think it is an erroneous view, because children are getting ample opportunities to unleash their immense creative potential. They get a lot of opportunities to create, to think, to apply their mind. And in the process, they really enjoy, they learn, and they not only learn, but are able to retain that for a longer period of time. So I think this is how continuous evaluation is of great significance. Then the point comes that it should be comprehensive. Now again, that is very, very essential, because you cannot evaluate somebody's intelligence, somebody's cognitive faculty, somebody's knowledge, theoretical knowledge, to draw the conclusion that somebody has really been educated in the best sense. That is why we have the provision of comprehensive evaluation. Let various aspects of the child's personality be evaluated. Let us evaluate whether the child is fit to live in society, whether the child has developed a strong potential to adjust with other members of the society, whether the child is well mannered, whether the child is educated, whether the child has a strong sensitivity, whether the child is concerned about other fellow students, the classmates, what is the attitude of the child. Here I would like to emphasize that attitude really plays the most significant role. And quite often we have to pay a big price for having negative attitude. Positive attitude plays such an immensely important role that sometimes we may not have aptitude for a particular profession, for a particular job, but because we have the right attitude, we are able to overcome all our problems, all our handicaps, all our difficulties. At some point of time, I remember having read that we are hired for hard skills, but we are fired for soft skills. So soft skills play such an important role that quite often we really find ourselves landing in a big trouble. Sometimes we do not have compatibility. We are not able to adjust with our fellow human beings. We are not able to adjust with our partners, with our colleagues, with our boss, maybe with our subordinates. So it is here that soft skills really play a very, very important role. So I think this CCE has adequate space, sufficient space, even for soft skills, and thereby it has really touched upon the various aspects of personality, that is holistic development. I think holistic development is one which not only aims at bookish learning. I do not subscribe to this opinion that only by reading a few books one becomes intelligent. It's not like that. Holistic development is something that really aims at training triple H's, that is hand, head and heart. Hand, the development of a skill of the hand, and then we have head, that is our cognitive development, and then development of the heart, sensitivity, empathy, sympathy, concern, kindness, generosity, fellow feelings. These are very, very, very important and significant areas where these three developments are of prime significance. And then moreover, as I have already spoken, that somehow we have to find a solution to this passion for cramming. Cramming has really, in today's scenario, has become the greatest curse. I think by cramming sometimes children no doubt temporarily are able to score very good marks, but when it comes to qualifying any competitive examination, they really find it very difficult. I would like to cite certain examples of those 12th class students from science background, from science stream. They get to the extent of 98% and sometimes beyond that, but still they are not able to crack IIT. Sometimes there are children who are able to get 100 out of 100 in different subjects, but when it comes to cracking any entrance examination, they find it very difficult. So somewhere this cramming really becomes the root cause of the problem faced by the child. So I think we have to find some out of the box solution. This out of the box is something that must be given due attention right from the beginning. It should be started right from pre-primary, and pre-primary children are very, very smart. They are quite active. I think children do not have limits of learning. It is we teachers who draw a line, who draw the boundary. Any target that we set for them is well within their capacity to reach. So I think if right from the beginning we develop this applicational ability, if the child's ability to solve some application based problems are developed, then I'm certain by the time the child passes class 12, the child will be very, very effective learner. I would like to cite the examples of certain foreign countries. Let's take the example of USA. When we compare our education system with the education system of USA, we find that at a school level, children in US are not so much burdened as the children of India. Indian students have immense potential. They are very industrious. They are very hardworking. Up to class 12, they are very, very sincere. They are very serious. When they go for higher education, I don't know what really happens. Somewhere they are not able to carry forward that particular ability which they have had in the school. And that's the reason why we do not have any Indian university in top 100 or maybe even in top 200. It's really a matter of surprise that we have nearly maybe 15 to 20 or 25 universities of US which are in top 100, maybe in top 50. So somewhere this higher education is another very important area that we have to look into, and that can be looked into properly if we start right from the beginning, that is pre-primary education and then primary education. I think when we were students, our teachers were very passionate about teaching, and whatever they taught we are able to retain till today. We can recite any number of poems, any number of Sanskrit shlokas. Now when I enter a class and ask my children, they really find it difficult. If I ask any one of them to recite a nursery rhyme, a class 10 child or class 12 child, it's very difficult. On the contrary, we have the capacity to recite a poem which we learnt some 20-25 years back. So something again is amiss. I feel there is again a dire need of serious introspection. So that is another thing that we should look into. Then reformation of education system. I think reformation has already begun, and slowly and gradually we definitely need to bring about more reformations. In particular, like as I spoke a little while ago about CCE, that is continuous and comprehensive evaluation. Similarly, there is a need of bringing about certain change in the curriculum of higher education, in the textbook, in the syllabus. It's really very surprising to note that certain books being taught at graduation and post-graduation level have become quite outdated. They were taught some 50 years back and they are being taught even now. So I think that we have to incorporate certain changes, and the incorporation of these changes will definitely yield the desired and fruitful result. And then I think there should be ample space given to both teachers and the taught. I think somewhere there should be adequate resource centers for the post-service training for the teacher. We only count on the pre-service training. I think that is not sufficient. A teacher also, like a mobile phone, has his battery run down sometimes, and that needs to be recharged. And this recharge is so effective. I clearly remember whenever we attend any workshop, any seminar, any conference, we are totally re-energized, and that energy lasts for quite considerable period of time. So I think that in India we need to have sufficient workshops, seminars, conferences. In-service training program should be there. And if there are adequate and regular in-service training programs, then certainly teachers will be more empowered. And I think if it is possible, we can even have exchange of teachers, mutual exchange. If a school has 2-3 sister concerns, 2-3 branches, even that can make a lot of difference. So I think that way the teacher will be constantly and regularly re-energized, recharged, and at the same time he'll be able to effectively impart the knowledge which he is supposed to. Similarly, children should also be given ample space to think. They should have a free breather. Quite often we think that it is the teacher who has to play the most important role. we quite often negate the very existence of children. That's wrong. I think children should not be considered to be passive listeners. They should be considered to be active partners in the process of teaching and learning. In other words, there should be sufficient interaction. And normally children like that class where teacher is very interactive, where the teacher gives an opportunity to the child to ask adequate and sufficient number of questions, where the child is given the touch therapy by the teacher. Touch therapy is another very important thing. It happens at times a child may be in a state of agony, pain, depressed, dejected. We have really to be concerned about that child. Sometimes we find a child is sitting listlessly, nonchalantly in the class without being focused about whatever we say. We start scolding the child without trying to know the reason why it is happening. I think the right way is that we should approach the child. We should find out what is wrong with the child. And once we have been able to find out what is wrong with the child, most probably we'll be able to solve the problem of the child. So I always think that children first love their teacher and then they love the subject. They hate the teacher, they hate the subject. So first thing is building of rapport in the classroom is of great significance. 40 minutes time, 30 minutes time or 40 minutes time that one gets in the classroom are more than sufficient provided every minute is suitably and fruitfully utilized. Quite often it is observed that a teacher without any introduction, without any recapitulation starts teaching. Children who are lost in some other worlds remain there only. As a result, they are not able to answer a particular question which is posed to them, and the teacher gets irritated. On the contrary, if the teacher goes in for recapitulation, if the teacher is able to sweetly bring the children back to the classroom by sharing some amusing story or by asking certain questions, by starting a warm-up exercise, I am certain this problem of listlessness or nonchalance can be easily overcome. And then that particular class can be very, very effective class. And the children also, maybe even if they are in such a state from which they find it very difficult to bring them back, they'll be quite glad. I just fail to understand one thing, that if a child is able to get glued to the television, why the same child sitting listlessly in a classroom? So somewhere I think a finger must be raised at us as well. That those who visualize TV programs are far more intelligent. The way they visualize everything, that is more appealing to them, that is more charming to them, and that's why they like. If we can understand this secret of those visualizers, that whatever we have to teach, we should really plan it sufficiently. We should prepare ourselves. If we have to teach 40 minutes or 30 minutes in the classroom, we should be adequately prepared for that class. We should not enter the classroom haphazardly and thinking that they're all passive listeners. We should blast for some time and then simply come out. No. That way, teaching cannot be one-way traffic. It has to be two-way traffic. Let the receivers, or rather, that is a negative word, I won't like to use the word receivers, right? Rather, the joint partners. Let the joint partners enjoy the most pleasant job of teaching and learning. Let them become ecstatic. Let them feel immensely elated with joy in the same way as they enjoy sitting in front of television. So I think that if this particular area is given sufficient space, then certainly the kinds of problems which normally we teachers complain about, the kinds of problems which we face, these problems can be sorted out in a jiffy. That's not a big task.
So, you brought out the very important things which are required for the effective learnings, and I hope we will also discuss many more things. But one thing I would like to ask you first here, as you said that the students sometimes like the subject but sometimes don't like the teachers, and sometimes vice versa. So how this rapport, what are the effective means to make this rapport? So that
As I have told earlier, that first of all we should develop a rapport with the children.
yeah.
Teacher psychology, that is educational pedagogy, psychopedagogy, sorry, is a very, very essential part. A teacher must understand the psychology of every child. The teacher must know the emotions which the child is undergoing, and that you can get to know easily. A teacher is smart enough by simply casting a single glance on the child. The teacher can get to know whether the child is sad or the child is happy. If the child is sad, even if you share a moment with the child, even if you try to ask certain questions, if you empathize with the child, if you're being sympathetic to the child,
Right.
I think you'll be able to sort out this problem. Then you can be able to develop an instant rapport with the child.
Okay, that is required.
That is very essential.
And only then being as a 3H, a scale of hand,
Very
a
true.
scale of head and heart is required.
Yes.
So one more thing, the class is of diverse, the students are from diverse background, diverse nature, diverse cultural manifestation. So there are so many things. So catching them and
It
striking
is again, I would like to say, it's very essential. Heterogeneity is very essential. Since society also has heterogeneity, we cannot have all the members living in the society of the same mental level, of the same intellectual capacity. So a classroom also comprises children of different level of intelligence. Maybe a particular child may be very intelligent, but that same child may not be very much emotional. The child may not be very kind and generous. Do you not think that generosity is also very essential? If being intelligent is essential, maybe a good sportsman, some child may be very good sportsman, somebody else may be a very good speaker. So why should we always try to highlight the intelligence of the child? So let the children be of diverse intelligence level. It is in fact required, because they mutually learn from one another.
Okay. So, well, friends, success mantra lies in understanding the diverse nature of the child and the class, and accordingly, we have to make a step forward for learning. Only then we can make a student to learn in their own environment and the way they want to learn. This is what we can say, and we would like to conclude the lecture here today. And I thank all of you for watching the lecture. On my behalf, I thank Mr. H.R. Sharma for giving such an insightful lecture on this very topic, role of education and child development. Thank you very much.
Thanks.